They said one game couldn't change a man. But that night, under the rain and the roaring lights, everything Ethan Cole believed in broke, burned, and was reborn. Before we dive into the story that changed rugby forever, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. Because what happens next will make you feel every heartbeat on that field. Rain whispered against the roof of the locker room like a secret that no one dared to say aloud. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, flickering every few seconds, painting the space in pulses of cold white. Mud-smeared boots lined the floor like fallen soldiers. The air was thick with liniment, sweat, and the faint scent of fear, the kind that only visits before a war dressed as a game. Ethan Cole sat on the wooden bench, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor, the laces of his cleats dangled untied. Around him, the Titans RFC murmured in low voices, the kind of talk men use to disguise nerves. Someone laughed loudly, someone else cracked his knuckles over and over again. The scoreboard outside hadn't even started, but the pressure was already here, sitting on every shoulder, pressing into every chest. Coach Darnell Rivers stood at the far end of the room, arms crossed, his broad frame blocking part of the whiteboard filled with formations and arrows. His face was unreadable, a stone that had weathered too many seasons, too many heartbreaks. He had been here before, once at the top, then buried under the weight of defeat. Tonight wasn't just about winning a trophy. It was about redemption, for him, for them, and especially for Ethan. A drop of water slipped from Ethan's hair to the concrete floor. He hadn't spoken in minutes. In his mind, the rain outside was louder than everything else. Louder than the nervous banter, louder than coaches pacing, louder even than his own heartbeat. He could hear it, a voice that didn't belong in this room anymore. "You promised me, Ethan, you promised we'd win this one." The sound of Liam Hayes' voice came like a memory, too clear to the imagination. Ethan's breath caught. For a second, he could see it again. The blinding stadium lights, the roar of 50,000 people, the tackle that went wrong, and the motionless body on the field. 3 years hadn't dulled it. If anything, the memory had sharpened, cut deeper with every passing day. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus on the sound of Coach Rivers' voice cutting through the haze. "Listen up." The coach's tone was calm, measured, but carried that rough edge of conviction that made grown men believe. "You've trained for this moment since you were kids. Every hit, every bruise, every damn drop of sweat led you right here. Don't waste it, don't fear it." The room stilled. The only sound was the hum of rain and the slow, rhythmic tap of a boot against the floor. Coach's eyes landed on Ethan. "Cole, you lead them out tonight, like you always have." Ethan blinked for a heartbeat. He hesitated, not because of fear of the opponent, but fear of himself. His throat tightened. "Yes, sir," he managed, voice low but steady. As the team huddled up, Aiden Ross stood a little apart, rolling the tape around his wrists. The kid had swagger, the kind that could be mistaken for arrogance, but Ethan saw something else behind it: hunger. He remembered what it was like to be that young, that sure, that untouched by ghosts. "Hey, Captain," Aiden said quietly as the others broke apart. "You good?" Ethan forced a smile. Always, but it wasn't true. Inside, he was unraveling. Maya Reed stood just beyond the glass wall outside the locker room, camera slung around her shoulder, watching through the reflection of the rain. Her story had started as a simple assignment, a piece on the American team making history in the World Cup final. But somewhere along the way, she realized this wasn't just a story about rugby. It was about one man haunted by a promise he couldn't keep. She lifted her recorder as the door opened and Coach Rivers shouted, "Titans, move out." The players filed past her one by one, the thud of boots against the hallway echoing like drum beats. Ethan was the last to step through. He paused for a second beside Maya. "You nervous?" she asked softly. He met her eyes, blue-gray like a stormy sky. "Always," he said again, this time with a faint grin that didn't reach his eyes. Out in the tunnel, the noise of the stadium hit them, a wave of sound that shook the concrete walls. The anthem was already playing. The floodlights painted the air white, slicing through the drizzle. Steam rose from the player's shoulders. Ethan adjusted the tape around his wrist, where he had written in fading black ink, Liam. As the Titans stepped into the light, a chant rolled across the stands. Titans. Titans. The ground seemed to pulse with it. Ethan felt it under his cleats, in his ribs. But with every heartbeat, the ghost of that voice whispered louder, "Don't choke, Ethan, not again." He looked up to the massive screen above the stadium, where the commentators were announcing the lineups. For a brief second, he saw Liam's face flash in his mind where his own should be, smiling, fearless, alive. Then it was gone. A den jogged beside him, nudging his shoulder. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Maybe I have." The whistle blew for kickoff warm-ups. Players stretched. The ball flew, bodies collided lightly in drills. The rain had slowed to a mist, the kind that clung to skin and made everything glisten under the lights. Ethan inhaled deeply. The scent of wet grass filled his lungs. It smelled like every memory he had. Glory, loss, pain, redemption, all tangled together. Coach Rivers called him over. "Cole," he said quietly, "whatever happens tonight, play your game, don't play the ghosts." Ethan nodded, but inside, the words barely sank in. Because how do you play your game when your game took your best friend's life? He jogged back to the team as the referee called both sides to the center. Across the field stood their opponents, massive, disciplined, ruthless. Ethan's gaze locked with their captain, a silent exchange of respect and challenge. "Titans on 3, someone shouted, 1, 2, 3. Titans." The roar that followed was deafening. The crowd surged, the lights flared, the referee raised the whistle. For a brief heartbeat, everything froze, the players, the sound, even the rain. And in that impossible stillness, Ethan heard it again, softer now, almost kind. "Play for me, brother." The whistle cut the silence. The ball soared through the air. Ethan sprinted forward, muscles coiling, heart pounding, lungs burning with something raw and electric. The collision of bodies, the thud of impact, the roar of the stands, it all blurred into one violent symphony. He tackled, passed, shouted commands. The team moved like a living thing. Every play rehearsed, every motion instinctive. But somewhere in that chaos, Ethan felt a strange calm settle over him. It wasn't the kind of calm that came from confidence. It was surrender to the game, to the moment, to the ghosts. Minutes passed like seconds, sweat mixed with rain. Blood trickled from someone's lip. The score stayed locked, tension winding tighter with every drive. Then it happened, a misstep, a loose pass, and the ball slipped from Ethan's hands. The stadium gasped as the opponent seized it. Sprinting downfield, Ethan lunged, missed by inches. The whistle blew, try scored. The scoreboard flashed red. Ethan froze, chest heaving. The sound of the crowd faded into static. In that noise, Liam's voice whispered again, not angry this time, not accusing. "It's okay, brother, you're still here." He blinked hard, shook his head, forced his focus back. Aiden was yelling at him to reset, to move. Coach Rivers' voice thundered from the sideline, "Shake it off, get your head back in the game." And for the first time that night, Ethan smiled. Not out of joy, but out of something like understanding. He looked up into the rain and whispered, just loud enough for himself to hear, "I'm here, Liam. I'm not running anymore." The referee's whistle signaled halftime. The score was close, but the game wasn't over, not by a long shot. As the team jogged off the field, Maya watched from the sideline, camera lens tracking Ethan's every move. She didn't know yet what haunted him, but she could feel it. That something deeper was playing out inside him than just sport. The locker room door slammed behind them. The silence returned, the storm outside grew heavier. Ethan sat down, dripping, trembling, breathing hard. Across the room, Coach Rivers started speaking again. Strategy, adjustments, words of war. Ethan barely heard them. All he could hear was the heartbeat in his ears, the echo of rain, and Liam's final whisper. This isn't just a game, Ethan. It's your chance to forgive yourself. Ethan closed his eyes, nodded once, and tied his laces tight. The storm was just beginning.